Welcome back to show number 59 in Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We've got a number of places to stop this week. We're going to start with Kurt Hohn, who's going to talk a little bit about Bayview's One Design race coming up this weekend. They do need some volunteers, and that's kind of explained a little bit in the show, so check that out. We will bring you all of the BOD race next week, including all of the activities that go on at Bayview, maybe some video footage of the new clubhouse and a variety of other aspects related to the BOD race. We also sat down with George Peet, who might be one of the better small boat and large boat sailors that this country's produced. Lives up in Harbor Springs and is involved in all kinds of races. And he's got world championships and Volvo experience under his belt and a variety of other sailing activities, including this past weekend when he was on Wind Quest, DeVos's 52 up at Harbor Springs. Talk a little bit about that race. And we finish up at Crescent Sail Yacht Club with a laser clinic put on by some guys at Crescent, kind of try to get those folks back out to see if we can't get more people to be a part of the sport, sort of one guy at a time, one person at a time to build the sport that we all love. So stay tuned, and I think you'll enjoy the show.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. We're talking with Kurt Hohn, who is this year's Bayview One Design sailing director, which is coming up this weekend. And first of all, appreciate taking a few minutes out to talk about the race. And I think it should be a pretty spectacular event this year.
I hope so. I mean, we're just dying to get out and race.
You have been somewhat tempered by pandemic. Last year you ran it late. Typically it's a race that's usually run, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, middle part of May. Yeah,
it's usually the first major regatta in our area. And last year we ended up going late because of COVID. We got it off. This year we're even later. We were hoping to get Canada open so we could have those boats. It's open one way, we can go there, but they can't come here. So unfortunately, we're not going to have the Canadian boats again this year.
And we're talking on Tuesday before the race on Saturday?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
All 3 days.
Yes.
Its registration is closed. Am I correct at this point?
Yeah. Okay. Today. Well, actually, today's the last day. So.
And how many boats you got? How many boats in?
72, something like that. Not our normal.
What are you typically at?
120 to 150, depending on the year.
Okay, so obviously border closings and pandemic and everything else still has an effect on it. Yes.
Yeah, and the later in the season, because kids are going back to school, college, so people lose their crew, and first thing in the spring, people are itching, so they want to get out and race.
Typically, this year it's going to be more of a smaller boat race than a bigger boat race. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
No 70s or a few 70s.
No, we're not doing the 70s this year.
Okay, so no 70s. What would be the biggest boat in the race?
J120s probably.
Okay.
40 footers.
But
the other problem we have is we have to keep our circles in America.
Oh.
When we plan the race, because when we plan the race, we couldn't go to Canada.
But you can now.
Now we can go to Canada. We're not allowed to anchor. So we'd have to hover a race committee boat if we went into Canada. So we didn't have the room to run big, long courses. We really have to choose our spots. So
now you've been racing a lot in the last few weeks with Superior and the two Max. And I know everybody's been really involved in those races. It's draining. So how much time does it take to race and still put a race on? You got to be exhausted.
Yeah, like we said, normally it's first thing in the spring and you got all winter to plan for it. Thankfully, I've got Carl Cuspa. He's been a huge help for me this year. And I was gone for basically 6 weeks and he took over the reins, and without him, this wouldn't happen. He was huge, but it's months and months worth of work to do a regatta, like any other major regatta.
Bayview's got a brand new clubhouse that there's just opened.
Beautiful clubhouse.
Does that help? That kind of, this maybe kicks that. I mean, you guys have already had parties to open it and those kinds of things, but it's got to be nice to come back to that this year for the party. Am I correct?
Yeah, last year we were in a tugboat, and this year we've got a brand new clubhouse, and it is gorgeous. Yes, this is the first major regatta. We did the D Cup last weekend, but this is the big party and the big venue, and it will show off our clubhouse.
Just for those who don't know, explain. I know some of the boats are running out of Crescent this next weekend, so just explain who's racing and what levels.
We've got 2 circles. We're going to have 5 starts per, so we can have 10 different levels of boats. We've got everything from Crescents to J120s that are racing, everything in between. We do have some perf classes. We have some level classes, and obviously the one design classes. One designs are racing Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Perfs and levels are racing Saturday, Sunday only.
This is your second year as chairman?
Yes. I kind of got thrown into it last year with COVID. The way we normally do it is you have 3 years, you work up into, and last year I was second and got thrown into it. And this year they asked me to come back and do it again. So,
well, I think having experience, I know your MAC chairman was also, Greg Thomas was also sent back in as sort of a last minute replacement, a few months before.
Yep.
Probably having that experience helps a little bit,
Yeah, but there's always something that comes up.
I understand that all of the parameters that you're facing, but is this a better race? Is this a better run race when it isn't early season?
I think so. Again, you got all winter with very little distractions to set it up. People are itching to get out there. People are burned out after doing all the majors.
Yeah.
So it hampers on our total amount of boats. But getting volunteers is tough. Everybody's burned out. They've been doing it all summer.
Okay. So I know there's been a number of things on Facebook about looking for volunteers. So maybe speak to that, at the moment, if you want to help. Go ahead.
Right now we're looking for things like golf cart drivers, at the club. Just because of our parking, a lot of our parking is off-site, which is just outside. We have security, so that's not a problem, but the walk to your boat is long. So we got golf carts and we need some drivers for that. Some parking lot attendants just to keep people that aren't supposed to be parked in there out. We're looking for what we call pluckers and chuckers. A couple of race committee people. The pluckers and chuckers work the windward mark or the leeward marks and pick them up and chuck them back in. We're looking for, I think, one guy to work a plucker or chucker all 3 days of the regatta. And we're looking for one person, I believe, to work on one of the race committee boats for Saturday and Sunday right now.
Are you racing?
I hope to.
Okay.
It's probably not going to happen this year. I did last year.
Is that the deep breath that maybe you're hoping like heck, just so that there's some fun on Saturday and Sunday?
The funny thing, I last year running it and your mind's going a million miles an hour. And when I was on the race course and the gun went off for the first start, I felt everything just go to ease because I knew we had a regatta at that point. So I'm sure the same thing's going to happen. As soon as that first gun goes off, I'll be relieved.
Somebody wants to watch the race. Is there a vantage point from shore that they can actually see?
Jefferson.
Okay.
Anywhere down Jefferson. Also, we're thinking of doing a river course this year, which we haven't done in about 4 or 5 years. So we may have a couple of classes on the river. So that would be right in front of Bayview.
What's the challenge of racing in a river? Just, and again, I've not raced in a river, so it's just obviously current, but what?
That is the big thing,
Okay.
is the current. I mean, if you've raced where there's tides and a good tide, this is a constant tide. Local knowledge helps, but it's the current is the biggest thing.
When does racing start on Friday? What time?
Call at the harbor. A harbor call is 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. So it's a full 3-day deal. And the party's Saturday night or Sunday?
We have parties Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
All three.
All three.
Okay.
Big night is Saturday, but all three.
What's your favorite part of this race?
When it's done.
Okay. Fair enough.
Handing the awards out, because then I know I'm done for the while.
You've sailed all of the big races and now you're doing this race. Is there a burnout point for you as a sailor in the summer? Or is it not, because winter's coming and you just want to?
No, it's really not. I love sailing so much. My grandfather raced. My dad's got 54 Mackinaws in. I've been sailing my whole life. So honestly, no, I don't get burned out.
Okay.
I love racing.
I asked that question because with a seasonal change here, to me, by the time you get tired of one sport, you're headed to the next one. Tired of that, you get tired of sailing, you get into golf. Golf goes into skiing. Skiing comes back into sailing, and it's sort of the cyclical animal that it is. But that's good. Well, listen, I appreciate you.
I also go downtown or down south during the winter, so that keeps me going.
So you're sailing 12 months a year.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Well, listen, Kurt, I can't tell you how much I've appreciated your time, and we'll get this up. We're also going to put up the email address of. Didn't you say there's an email address for somebody if you want to volunteer?
Jim Morphew. It's MORPHEWJP at yahoo.com.
Okay, I will stick that up someplace on this, on the bottom underneath, and have a great race, and let's hope everything turns out great. Good weather. Good. You got good weather, so that's a good thing.
I just want wind.
Cool. Lucky enough to have with us one of America's best sailors, George Peet. George is 24 Melgis champion, national champion, and
North American champion, national, European, Italian, everything but world champion.
all kinds of championships. Grew up in Harbor Springs, obviously grew up in Grand Traverse Bay.
Yeah, Little Traverse Bay.
Little Traverse Bay. I want to say Grand Traverse Bay. That's
okay.
wrong part of town.
We'll forgive you. People in Emmett County will forgive you.
We share a love of ski racing. We can probably talk a little bit about that, but explain ski racing and sailing as being they're somewhat similar, I think, at least they are to me.
I mean, certainly offshore sailing, well, I guess, yeah, and single-handed sailing, you learn there are a lot of the same character traits that kind of are similar. You really need to know how to control your energy level, know yourself, know your abilities, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and ski race you have to have a tactical approach and you have to peak at the right time, and certainly inshore sailing is very similar in that regard, especially Olympic sailing or trying to win these one design championships. And then offshore sailing, you really need to know how to deal with sort of adverse conditions which are presented to you all the time in ski racing. So there are a lot of similarities in the competitive nature of those two sports, and then I'm not exactly sure why there's such a crossover with a lot of the athletes, but there certainly is in the Midwest, and also on the East Coast. Sort of in the West, maybe not so much, but yeah, they seem to kind of go hand in hand.
there's some symbiotic relationship about, sort of using nature's own power, whether it's gravity coming down a hill or wind coming across the water. Maybe there's some connection to that.
Yeah.
What I want to get to, though, and we're going to talk a little bit about the career. You've been on WindQuest. It's on the shirt. You've been on Doug DeVos's boat. The last of the races for this summer was just held at Bay Harbor.
Not the last. We still have one more.
One more?
We still have a championship weekend in Holland, Michigan.
Macatawa?
In 2 weeks, yep.
Okay. You had the second to last weekend.
Correct.
This past weekend. We had 4 boats up there. And talk a little bit about the weekend. You guys had a pretty successful event.
We did. It was almost very successful. Really nice weekend. It's a bit tricky. It's a bit of a shame, but it's also kind of worked out in a weird way that we're missing a few boats from the fleet. We've had 2 boats with mast failures. Say what you want. There are always pundits here and there, but the reality is these are high performance machines. We've sailed the boats pretty hard in a handful of coastal races as well as some inshore races this year. And these masts in this equipment, it breaks from time to time. And unfortunately, we've just had 2 pretty serious failures out of the 6 boats that were initially in this fleet this year. Sort of the little bit better side of that, or the positive takeaway, is that the fleet's pretty close. There are 2 boats out of the mix, which really opened the door for these other 2 boats to be in the mix for the season championship. And certainly last weekend, we had Mockingbird and Vesper both right in the game the entire time, which was pretty fun to see. And we're going to have our hands full with those guys next weekend, or in 2 weeks at the championship event.
Will Bob Hughes be back for Macatawa race?
I have heard rumors that Bob Hughes, that the Heartbreaker, will be back.
Okay. Natalie J broke its mast.
Correct.
And the other boat that's out?
Those are the only 2 at the moment.
Okay.
We had 6 for this year.
There's been a lot of conversation about the quality of the fleet. There's probably 3 or 4 great fleets worldwide. Obviously, the Mediterranean is a beautiful fleet.
Yep.
As well as what's in California. But the Great Lakes fleet, I got to think, is with guys like you and some of the folks that are racing. There's no lack of experience nor talent. It's the real deal when you watch it.
It certainly is. I mean, any one of the boats or the teams competing in the Great Lakes fleet could certainly go to the Super Series and absolutely be right in the game. There's very little difference except for a little bit of the equipment. Some of the boats here actually wouldn't be allowed to compete because they're Pack 52s and not Super Series 52s. So they have a little taller mast and maybe a little longer prod or deeper keel, some variation on the equipment. But outside of that, certainly the teams, they're all right there. So yeah, it's pretty competitive.
It's interesting too. Everybody's done it a different way. If you look at Chris Duhan's boat, there's a lot of guys that are friends and just guys that have sailed together. If you look at some of the other syndicates, there's guys that are pros. There's a mix and variety of crews and fleets the way they run the boats. I think that's kind of interesting.
There is, and that's been a big part of putting together the fleet in the Great Lakes. Obviously, if you want to really pursue the absolute highest level, you would go to the Super Series. I think a lot of these guys are just really interested in sailing with some of their friends because these are pretty special machines. These sailboats are absolutely fantastic, and to be able to share that with some of your friends is pretty cool, and to be able to do it in the Great Lakes is even better.
Now, you work for Quantum, but my question to you is, are we still sailing on foils and helmets, or are we back to the 52s in 10 years for the America's Cup?
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I'm pretty sure that foiling is here to stay. And I'm not sure what the next evolution, the next big jump will be. But foiling's here to stay, and I would say that there's a strong possibility that we'll be back to a solid wing, and you're going to see some refinement in these packages that I think are going to be really, really impressive, and we will see boats racing at 50 knots of boat speed for probably the entire race in the next America's Cup.
Are we pushing a point of safety when we got those kinds of boats? Because I've
100%. And this has been an ongoing thing I coached Bora for a long time in the lead up to the Rio Games, and when he first started sailing in NACRA, I sailed with him a little bit and obviously coached him. And those boats are inherently dangerous. That's the most dangerous sailboat out there, I think, is the NACRA. Certainly the F50 catamaran. Actually, that's probably the most dangerous boat out there. I mean, a catamaran, it's a great foiling platform. It's incredibly fast. You have to move a lot. You saw the new America's Cup boats, the monohulls. Only a third of the crew actually moved. Everyone else was stationary. So that really improved on the safety in my mind. These AC-50s, as soon as you jibe or tack, you go from the outside corner of the boat that is, turning, so it's actually accelerating, and then you have to fight the gravitational force of that turn and run across the platform. You're really asking for an accident to happen. Even though those guys are tethered, last week in Aarhus, one of the guys broke his leg, and it was really just a pretty routine crash, but every one of those is like being in a car accident, and that happens at least once a day.
The sport of sailing, of sail racing, those who run the rules part of it don't seem very easily persuaded to look at safety in maybe in other sports. I'll use skiing as the example. When you used to have the long, skinny 200 meters slalom skis, and they dropped to 155s. The FIS really quickly understood that the 55s were too wide in the waist, and kids were blowing their knees out because the skis would turn, their bodies wouldn't turn with them. So they went to a 65. They made rules that made some sense. Now, at the professional level, maybe it doesn't matter.
I would say that safety always matters. These guys in the Sail GP are very highly trained. Safety is taken incredibly seriously. Same thing in the IMOCA fleet, and same thing with these Ulteam trimarans. These guys are all very aware of the risks involved, and it's taken seriously. There are a lot of things in the rules to try to mitigate, collisions or the the absolute risk involved. At the end of the day, we're all competitors. A lot of us are adrenaline junkies, and it's really no different than racing motocross or riding a snowboard in a super pipe or skiing the Hohn and Calm downhill. I mean, for whatever reason, people like to send their bodies through the air between 50 and 80 miles an hour. I don't know why, but that's what we're doing.
In the entry level of junior sailing, should we be sending messages about foiling? Should there boats cost is always part of that discussion, I get it. But should we be teaching younger kids about foils?
100%. I think so. I mean, it's a technology that I believe is here to stay. We ride on airplanes almost every day, and it's the same exact principles apply. And this is also, I think, not only in sailing and competitive sailing and windsurfing and kiting and winging, but this is going to be the future, I think, of ocean transport as well. I mean, there's some pretty cool stuff. If you get Seahorse magazine or you kind of scour the internet, there are some naval architects out there who are pretty crafty and doing some pretty cool things with boats and with big ships and foils and solid wing masts and kites. So I think you've got to expose kids to this. This is a realm where this could potentially give some kid a jump later on in life and inspire him or her to do something totally crazy and different.
I think of UFOs and 420s as being in the same ballpark price-wise. They're pretty close.
Yeah, and I think that I believe it's called a Nika and a Skita, which are now built from Melgus. I don't think that those are terribly expensive, and I know that Sail GP also has an initiative where they've been approaching yacht clubs to help with a group buy and also instruction on how to sail these boats at different times throughout the summer, different yacht clubs.
As a novice, I jump on a UFO. I have marginal sailing skills. What is it that I would have to know about the foil that I probably wouldn't understand it from a monohull? Balance?
Balance and understanding stall. So when you use the telltales on your normal sailboat every day and you over trim the main and the telltales on the leech suddenly wrap around and don't fly anymore, that's because the airflow is stalled. And you have to realize that the water and the foil interact in exactly the same way. And you have to realize that you need to be going a certain speed for the foil to operate, and that the balance or the balance and the pitch of the foil through the water is incredibly important in getting that foil to operate properly. So sort of having an understanding of what that relationship is and what it looks like before you actually get on one of these boats, I think is pretty important. And the biggest resource really out there is YouTube. And you know, if you're going to go and sail any one of these foiling craft, whether it's a foil board with a wing or a foil board with a kite or with a windsurfer or a moth or a skita or a UFO, you know, I would highly recommend going onto YouTube and finding the best person who you can research and find out about and see if they have a video posted of them sailing or winging or doing whatever it is they're doing, foiling, however it is.
I asked the question because there's a lot of discussion between, you know, you look at an Optimist and the kids jump into 420s, and there's this conversation about, is it appropriate to go from an Optimist to a 420? Is there a middle boat? You know, and that's been part of that discussion, and so foils come as part of that discussion because it's just a different technology. If you're buying new boats for yacht clubs, again, money is always an issue, but you're trying to present kids with an opportunity so that they're still sailing at 25. At the same time, provide them with an avenue that for that 2 or 3 kids in your club that might have an aspiration to be somebody like George Peet, who's looking to make a profession out of it. And I think a junior sailing organization has that, I think, obligation. I don't think that's something that...
I tend to agree. I totally agree. And you know, I've been newly appointed / elected to the board at Little Traverse Yacht Club in Harbor Springs, my home yacht club, and it's certainly something I'm going to push for. They had a pretty good fundraiser this summer. They have a bunch of new 420s. The equipment that they have is very serviceable and very good for probably the next 3 years. So I'm going to advocate that they try to buy 1 or 2 of these foiling boats.
Let me take back, because I want some history. You started in Harbor Springs. Remember the first time in a boat? Was it a family sail?
So started out actually sailing Lightnings in Bay City, Michigan. We lived in Saginaw for a while, and my grandparents always had a house in Harbor Springs, so we spent all of our summers there. Raced the Lightning in Bay City when my brother and I did with my father when we were quite young, from probably 8 until maybe 12 or 13, and traveled around and met all kinds of people and camped in vans and yacht club lawns. And my first sailing experience that I remember vividly was at a friend's cottage, a friend of my parents, on the Straits of Mackinac, and my dad had his sunfish there, and his buddy had a sunfish, and we were sailing around on those, and we sailed onto the Mackinac Bridge, just the, you know, not the big span, just the edge of it there, close to Mackinac City, and capsized. And I remember the water was pretty cold, and I wasn't really into that, but for whatever reason, I kept going back for more.
You said earlier that adrenaline was part of the sport. Are you an adrenaline junkie?
Yeah, I would say so.
So this is not an avocation. This is your vocation.
Yeah. Yep.
So you supplement it by selling sails as part of that. Is that part of the deal?
That's something that's kind of just started. It there's a good opportunity with Quantum. I'm trying not to travel as much with some of these big maxi programs I used to sail with and some of these big offshore teams. And you know, if you don't travel and you don't put in the days, you don't make as much money. So you got to find a way to kind of supplement your income. And you know, I've always had a great relationship with Ed Reynolds and a lot of the guys in Traverse City. They've always been supportive of Bora and myself and kind of what we've always been doing in the Malgus 24 and with the Moth. Even though they didn't make Moth sails per se, they were always willing to help us. So it was just kind of a natural fit. The loft here in Detroit kind of turned full Quantum, and the product's really good. So I'm completely happy and confident, representing their brand. I use their sales all the time, and we've been winning a lot of regattas, so it's all kind of going the right direction.
While you're in Harbor, you got involved in ski racing?
Yep.
High school ski racer on to college at Michigan Tech?
Yep.
What's your major at Michigan Tech? I'm curious.
I studied biochemistry.
So if you weren't a sail racer, you would be...
Medical school was firmly on my horizon.
Okay.
And I was left with what turned out to be a pretty easy choice by the time I looked at the financial aid paperwork, and the loan for 1 year was going to be about 8 times what I paid for my whole 4 years at Tech. And then I also had an offer to do the Volvo Ocean race. I chose the Around the World race.
It's easier than being in debt.
Yeah, it seemed so at the time, yeah.
It's an isolation part of Houghton is you got to get used to Houghton.
You do.
I used to write, I spent a year there. You used to have to write, you used to tell my mom was in the library all the time. The problem was the library was a downtown bar. So as you're well aware, Tony's Bukovich's Red Wing Lounge. It turns out he's my uncle. So
Okay.
we spent a lot of time in those two places. It was probably why I only lasted a year. When did you know you wanted to make a career out of this? When, at what point, and then the follow-up to that question is, when did you recognize that you could make a living out of this? And maybe it's the same time.
I don't. I'll tell you. Okay, so there are two instances. One kind of the first, my first exposure to full-on professional sailing and sort of recognizing the difference between someone who does this for a living and what I was doing was I was lucky enough to be invited to race Key West Race Week with Dave Irish, I think in 1997. I was in high school, and we had a guy, younger Kiwi guy, Morgan Trubovich, who at that stage had just signed on with Team New Zealand's America's Cup team, and who recently won the J70 Worlds and also won the 52 event this past weekend at Bay Harbor. I was lucky enough to share a room with him. I believe we won Key West Race Week that year on the Mum 30, and it was a really cool situation. And it was at that stage where I was like, wow, I could maybe do this. I never really thought too hard about it, but I was like, it seems like, maybe there's an option there. And then my senior year in college at Michigan Tech was the 2001-2002 Volvo Ocean Race, which Ilbrook won. And I remember it was the first time where they had good tracking, I had good internet, and it just all kind of worked, and you could actually follow the race pretty closely, which I did. And I was just absolutely infatuated with the Volvo Ocean Race. And it was sort of like around April of my senior year, I'm watching the Volvo Ocean Race finish, and I thought to myself, you know what, I really, really, really want to do this. And I graduated from college, and then I took an apprenticeship position at Hood Sailmakers in Newport, Rhode Island, a year and a half later, and just kind of got my feet wet, and did some day laboring stuff and working at the sail loft, and just kind of getting connected with all the people in the industry, and just kind of kept pushing my way through, racing on different boats and meeting different people, and always trying to learn. And soon enough there was an open tryout for the ABN AMRO, and I went for it, and I was lucky enough to make my way onto that team.
You're 41?
Yes.
You got a 21-year-old kid sitting in front of you who wants to be a pro racer. What do you tell him? Where does he start? Obviously get his degree first. Whatever that degree is.
Yeah, I mean, going to college is certainly, I think, pretty important.
Where does he start?
Oh man, that's a tough one. There are a lot of different routes. Kind of talking to people, telling them you're interested is absolutely where you start. Finding out where the race boats are, and really you just got to show up. So if I were 21 and really wanted to do this, I can tell you that the majority of the TP52s live at Torreson Marine in Muskegon in the Great Lakes. There are also a couple of Santa Cruz 70s over there, and a lot of boat captains, and just start hanging out and show up and go introduce yourself and ask questions, and as long as you're just kind of you have a good attitude. Most of these guys, they're normal guys, they're hardworking guys. They'll talk to you and ask them if they need a hand, and tell them that you want to make a go of this, and that you want to get started. And if you can work for free, that'll get you a long ways. You definitely kind of have to show up and put in some time and not expect to get paid, because you've got to prove your value.
Right.
Especially these guys don't know you from Adam.
How crucial is it to be a small boat sailor before you hit the big boats?
It's not incredibly important.
Okay.
You can kind of start anywhere. I've met and known guys who only sailed super yachts, and maybe they even started on motor yachts, and then just kind of really fell in love with the sailing or the competitive aspect or whatever it was, and ended up working their way all the way down to like a FAR 40 type of race boat, or a MUM 30, or something similar.
Again, novice question, but you're in the Volvo, around the world, so we're talking how many days?
Longest leg 32, 33 days. Shortest leg 36 hours, 40 hours.
What's the best part of that race?
Oh man, it just depends. The best part of that race for me, I think, was there were a couple of highlights certainly. We had an incredibly tough start to our third Southern Ocean leg, and we fixed all of our equipment, and we persevered, and we were 800 miles behind the fleet for a long time, and we went outside. We went to the east of the east of the I forget the islands off the southeast coast of South America, and made a huge gain and seized the last podium spot in that leg. That was a major highlight, and then the 24-hour record was another huge one.
Do you gain? This is an obvious question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you gain personal confidence every day you're on those boats, knowing in every kind of crisis that comes up? Because now you're stuck in the middle of an ocean. It's not like sailing like Michigan or even Lake Superior. It's got to be. I guess it would either crush you or make you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I never really thought about it. It absolutely does. It must. There's no way that you can endure all of these and experiences.
Because
and
it's
make
impossible to go all the way around the world and not have some difficulty.
Yeah. Oh no, there's difficulty every day.
If nothing more than weather.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of time. 80% of that race is really just looking after yourself and looking after your teammates and looking after the boat. 20 to 30% of it's actually racing. There's a lot of just surviving and keeping everything in one piece. The one thread I ask a lot of guys. You're a racer, obviously. Is there any time in the calendar that you cruise for fun? Like on a sailboat,
yeah.
Or just in life?
No, just cruise on a sailboat.
I mean, kind of. For 4th of July, we take the Malgus 24 out and put the dogs on it, and you're
a regular guy then.
Yeah, and we just sail around and rip around in the mooring field and buzz the beach, and
it's been some of the answers have been funny because I've asked that question of a lot of world class guys, and about half are just we sail around, we enjoy ourselves. Garrett Jobson was actually showing his pictures with his grandkids in a Ted Hood boat that he had just built, and then some of the other guys are like, no, we're adrenaline junkies. Even if we're 65, we're still fighting the battle.
Yeah.
So, there's no asking the question.
No, I mean, we ride mountain bikes and road bikes. There's plenty of other activities.
Is this lifestyle for you conducive to being married, kids? Is it really a single man's business?
It's totally possible. There are some guys who have, it seems like, from everything I know, there are certainly guys who have great family lives, great kids, some of them I know personally, and have made it work. I would say that the majority of people, it's incredibly hard. It doesn't work for a lot of people, and I've experienced that, and that's why, I've taken a job now working for Quantum. I don't travel quite as much. I pick and choose my events more. And in doing so, I've taken a pay cut. But that's a conscious decision. Now, aside from the money, the commitment to the sport is, commensurate with the level of results you're going to achieve. If you want to win a world championship and you want to win an Olympic medal or an America's Cup, I mean, this is your life, and you better have a partner who is accepting of that and willing to support you in that, because if that's not the case, it's going to be a long road.
Now, you were looking at a partner in, I think, Chelsea Sims, and for 2024.
Yep.
But there's no keel boats for.
Correct.
That they made that decision here recently, right?
Yep. I think about really about 4 or 5 months ago, we had 4 months ago, we knew it was kind of over. But it was officially announced about a month and a half ago to 2 months ago that event won't be happening, which, it's not a big surprise. If you look at the undertaking, it's massive to build these boats. And
You were going to sell what kind of boat?
that was part of the issue was that they didn't have the equipment selected, nor was it even built. So
That's the problem.
Yeah, and they had an entire scheme, which was pretty cool, that they were going to design these boats and build them, and no one was allowed to have one or to know what they were, which was going to be pretty cool. And then you were going to come to the Olympic Games, and there were going to be 26 or 30 one design offshore double-handed boats that no one has ever sailed before.
Look like an IROC race for car racing.
Yeah.
So that everybody's that's actually really the best sailor.
Yeah.
Versus the equipment being slightly
Yeah.
tweaked and changed. So
Yeah.
Would that have been a concept? Sounds good.
Concept is awesome, and I wouldn't rule it out. There's still a chance that you're going to see this event in LA 2024.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I think so.
Did you ever figure out budget-wise? Is this a six-figure?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all of these Olympic sailing programs they're massively expensive. That shouldn't deter you, because there are certainly people out there. If you want to go to the Olympics and you're serious about it and you're achieving good results in the lead up, there are certainly people out there who will support you financially. Stephanie Roble and Maggie Shea proved that. They basically started right at the bottom, and I think they were 10th at the Olympic Games or 11th, and it's the Olympics. It's incredibly hard to be in the mix, but they won 3 or 4 ISAF medals prior to that, and they had a great series.
In doing the show, we've had an opportunity to talk with a lot of folks in the Lake Michigan area, a lot of folks in Lake Huron, Lake Erie. It's a real regional flavor. Everybody's got a different opinion about each region. So the guys up north, if you start looking at some of the folks that have been produced from the Traverse City and Harbor Springs area, there's some serious guys that race.
Yeah.
And I wonder, in your mind, do they get some of those guys, and does the area get the credit for how good the sailors come out of there? Think they do?
Oh, I have no idea. I've never really thought about it like that. I think that a lot of us, Matt Cassidy, myself, Scott Sellers, a lot of these guys, we were lucky enough to have Dave Irish there, who always put together, always had a great boat, which it wasn't always the nicest boat, but he always worked to make sure that it was prepared well, that it was competitive, that it was safe, and that he had good sails, and basically always had a boat where he had a chance to win, and the equipment wasn't going to be a limiting factor. And he really made it fun that way, for people like Matt, Scott, myself to go and sail with him, because suddenly he trained you how to work on the boat, how to take care of it, and then you got to show up with a boat where you knew you could win. And then he would always bring in really good people to help you win, you know, whether it was a sail trimmer or a navigator or a tactician. And, you know, he did that for a really long time, all the way through his life. And, you know, by bringing in kind of one of these specialist guys with other people who were serious and really into it, you know, the knowledge was just sucked right out of those guys, and you know, immediately made an impact in the local fleet, and people were better.
Was he a mentor?
Dave?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dave has recently passed.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I still have a 15-foot Irish boat in my garage on a trailer
Oh, cool.
that I've had, I think, for 25 years. It's been there for quite a while. So it's his passing was unfortunate, and he left behind an unbelievable legacy.
He certainly did. Yeah, I feel so lucky that I was able to be a part of that.
Some of those old guys I've had a chance I was going to interview Buddy, but it didn't work out just because he's not really capable of doing interviews, especially long-term interviews. But nicest guys in the world, and some of the guys who have sailed at the highest levels. I think that's
Yep.
the thing that makes it cool. Really simple question. What is it you like about sailing? And that's a harder question you think when you really think about the answer.
What do I like about it?
Yeah.
As much as it's the same, it's always different.
Okay.
Different things always work. You get to be outside. I really enjoy being outside, whether it's cold and raining or snowing or, you know, there's ice or whatever it is. But, you know, it's always different. It's always a completely new set of circumstances, even though it's all kind of similar. It's always different, and different things always work. You're always learning, and there's always somebody else who seems to be able to kind of do it better, you know, whether it's for an entire regatta, one race, or even just part of a race. And there's always a lot of that's a new one.
And at 41, you said you've kind of slowed down some things to be a little more centralized. Is that because of 41, and maybe there's some other things you want to do with your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to start a family and kind of move in that direction. But also it's, yeah, you know, like I used to ski, 200 some days a year, 200 plus days a year for a long time in my life. And then I had a long time where I didn't ski at all for about 6 years. I would like to go skiing again. There's certainly other things I would like to do.
If you're a compulsive, obsessive personality, and again, as a ski coach, I used to spend, like you said, 120, 125 days a year on skis. It's just, you miss it, but there's not a lot of replacement because it beats the hell out of drinking beer and sitting in a corner somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So Macatawa Championships coming up in 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
So
yep.
that's Labor Day weekend.
Yep.
Then what happens? Take a little time off, back up to harbor?
No, I have a pretty full program, actually. The traveling thing actually didn't work out. I'm going to LA on Monday for a practice session with Taylor Canfield and Mike Buckley for the Congressional Cup. So we'll sail the Catalina 37s in Long Beach for 5 days. And I'll come home and we will race our Malgus 24 on the Red Fox on Lake Charlevoix. So if you've got a boat or you want to sail, go on the yacht scoring and, you know, look at the registrants and try to mine some email addresses and send some notes if you're interested. It's always a fun time. And then that Tuesday we go to Holland for the 52s, finish that up, and then fly right to Long Beach for the Congressional Cup.
Cool.
Then I think we have 2 weeks off, and then we go to the Bermuda Gold Cup, and then it slows. Then we have some August 24 sailing, Muskegon, and the Fall Invitational at Lake Geneva.
By the time you get to Lake Geneva, it'll be starting to snow here, and a couple of weeks after that, not too far
Exactly.
farther, then you get back on skis.
Yeah.
All right. Olympics at some point for you?
You know, if that double-handed thing happens, I think so. Chelsea is really pushing me to try to sail the NACRA.
What is the NACRA?
The NACRA 17,
Okay.
the mixed-gendered
Right.
foil and catamaran, which, you know, it appeals to me. But if I don't know, I would rather I'd rather try to go to a couple of moth worlds and get her a boat and do that instead, because I like that a little bit more. And I guess maybe my confidence isn't as high as it would have been 8 or 10 years ago, entering into the NACRA class. But it's also that I'm by no means, fooled as to what the commitment is.
When you're on WinQuest, what is your, I guess I never asked, I should probably ask, what is your, on WinQuest, what's your job? But more importantly, what is it you're best at on a sailboat, on a big one?
Bigger boats, so on the 52, on the WinQuest, I trim the jib and spinnaker. When I sailed in Natalie J, I would trim the jib or the spinnaker or the main, and then in the Mackinac races, steer quite a bit and work on the tactics and the navigation. And then most of the offshore boats, I steer those quite a bit. So that's that, and trimming the sails, I think, is my specialty. But I think I'm also pretty good at just not being averse to working hard, which racing offshore, I mean, there's a pretty direct correlation between, being on your feet and being alert and being aware and awake and moving sails around and making sail changes and making the right decisions and doing things smoothly and safely, and I think I'm pretty good at all of those as well.
I'm not sure I could do those kinds of sailing, because those little bunk beds that fold out from inside, have to sleep on those little cot things, like you're in prison. I'm sure I would not work with that very well. So it is what it is. Listen, you've had a tremendous career, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We're going to talk to some of your Harbor guys. We're going to talk to Dave McVicker. We have a number of folks that we know, and I wanted to look in the camera and say that Bob Weil, we're both familiar with Bob. So, Bob, we're saying hi from in front of the water. But last time I think I saw Bob was was out at Hood,
okay,
out of Oregon. So it's been a while. But I took a few years off of ski racing and got back in last year. So
nice.
Now I'm back on the Cussa circuit, and we'll see where it goes. But it's been fun watching your career in the 52s and all that you've meant, and so I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, man. That was a really good interview. We're talking with Greg Gerhardstein, who is one of the board members at Crescent Sail Yacht Club. They're putting on a laser clinic today. Greg, talk a little bit about what you guys are doing.
So we have a laser fleet here that sails throughout the year, but no real organized racing during the summer, because most of the people who sail the lasers are typically sailing on dinghies or big boats through the summer. After Labor Day, the fleet gets a little more active, and we go into what we call frostbiting mode, which is cold weather sailing, and we will sail as late as the last weekend in November, or maybe even the first week or two of December. It just depends on what the temperature and conditions allow. And we did really well last year, surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, because of the pandemic. This was and is the perfect social distancing boat. And so the fleet, I would say, doubled in size last season, okay? And we had a lot of people come out late in the year with newer boats, and they weren't super familiar with lasers, and that was great. Everybody had great enthusiasm, but we thought, why don't we get people a little bit more up to speed this summer for this coming frostbiting season, and get them familiarized with the boat, get them up to speed, or shift them into a higher gear so they're ready to race in the fall, and they can decide if they want to buy the upgrade equipment and or buy the cold weather clothing that goes along with cold weather sailing. You might need a wetsuit, you might need a dry suit, things like that. So that's sort of what this is all about here today. It's free. It's for people who are interested in doing frostbiting or just learning more about laser sailing.
Explain that lasers are easy boats to sail. Even you don't have to have great experience.
Right.
And the other part of it is that sometimes we think lasers is mostly kids sailing.
Not at all. Yeah, we hear that, we think that, we see that, but if you think of a sunfish, they're about as easy as a sunfish to sail, but they are the single biggest one design fleet in the world. They're an Olympic boat that is still raced widely around the world by kids. Anyone 9 to 92 people can participate, and it doesn't matter what your weight range is. There are 3 size rigs, so it's one of these things where it's widely accessible and it's simple to sail, and it's a ton of fun.
And the lessons are coming today from you and also coming from
We have local experts on site.
Ken Swetka is a
Ken
national
Swetka.
Vice
We have-
Commodore here at Crescent is also
we
a
have
national reg guy.
Lee Savage, we have Liam Walls, we have Billy Vogel. We've got some really good knowledge depth and base here. And so just about any question anybody has about lasers, whether it's rigging, how to sail trim, boat handling, jibing, tacking, capsizing, best practices, and just a general discussion of lasers, lasering, cold weather sailing, that sort of thing. It's all here right now.
Guy's a 40-year-old guy. He's got a cruising boat. All of a sudden he decides lasers. He wants to get into it, doesn't know a lot about it. What's a typical laser cost? I mean, I know there's a price range differences, but
Most people won't buy a brand new laser, which is $5,000 or $6,000. Most people are going to jump in between $1,000 and $2,000. You can get them for $500 to $1,000, but you're probably going to spend money on upgrade gear for an upgraded Vang, an upgraded Outhaul, an upgraded Cunningham. So, you know, if you want a decent boat, $2,000 to $3,000, get you in.
what do you like best about lasers?
So many things, but
One thing.
I can go out by myself anytime, as long as there's a breeze. You can have fun anytime, anywhere. It's very portable, and it's very accessible, and is very popular. So you can be in a fleet of 1 or a fleet of 100. It's fantastic.
And sometimes this is one of those, you're growing the sport literally one sailor at a time.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the goal here, is to get at least one more person interested today, and then we'll go from there. So
Thanks,
that's
Greg.
the deal. You bet.
Talk with Liam Walls, one of the better laser sailors in southeastern Michigan. What do you like about the laser?
It really brings you back to the fundamentals of sailing. It's a very simple boat due to the one design rules, which are pretty strict for a one design class. And it really just comes down to sailor on sailor and who's smarter, who's faster. At the end of the day, it's just a lot of fun.
You're explaining to a Martian what's the one thing you like about lasers. What is it?
Really like the downwinds, honestly, and the big breeze when you get to put the bow down and plane upwind.
50 knots of breeze, how fast can you go on a laser?
Upwind, you're probably topping out around like 5.5 knots.
Downwind.
Downwind, as fast as the waves go, so maybe 10 knots.
So it's an exciting ride.
Yeah, it can be pretty exciting.
Cool. Thanks. Talking with Billy Vogel, one of the best laser sailors who just graduated from high school. At Nationals, we had a chance to have you on the show earlier. I'm just asking a very simple question. What's the one thing you love about lasers above all else?
Honestly, what I love most about the laser is how easy it is to go to all sorts of events across the country. Even like all you do is you take the boat, you put it on the top of your car, you can go wherever you want. You don't have to worry about finding crew or anything like that. It's super convenient, super fun to sail, and I love the boat.
All right, so out, Tuesday afternoon, you're out in the water all by yourself. There's a good breeze, and you're thinking to yourself, what is it, the one thing about that boat that you love?
Honestly, I just love how fast you can go for the size of it. You know, obviously you have boats like the 49er that are a lot faster, but it's a very simple and cheap boat to get into, and you can go super fast, especially on the reach. You're planing, you're flying across, and it's a very competitive class as well. So you can go all these regattas. You have a lot of really highly skilled and highly talented sailors.
I want to thank Greg Gerhardstein for pulling all the information together for the laser clinic over at Crescent, and bringing maybe one sailor at a time to the sport that we all love. Certainly, George Peet. It was a great conversation, George, with all of the skiing and the sailing and what it's like to be insightful to talk a little bit about being a pro sailor and all that goes into that. And certainly a great thanks to Kurt Hohn, who is this year's Bayview BOD's race chairman, and pulling all that together. And hopefully we'll give some access to that next week. So if that being the case, fair winds, a little cooler temperatures, and thanks for watching.